The crimes committed within the concentration and death camps within the Third Reich shocked the entire world after the Second World War. Following the conflict, trials were held to bring those perpetrators of war crimes, mass murder and atrocities to justice. The most high-profile trials took place at Nuremberg, with the remaining members of Hitler's inner circle and Nazi leadership, including key figures such as Rudolf Hess and Hermann Goering, being placed on trial. During the proceedings, much evidence was shown, including footage showing the death and depravity from inside the concentration camps, filmed after they were liberated. In this video we look at 10 deadliest Nazi death and concentration camps, those camps which became factories for mass murder. The crimes committed at these camps in particular are associated with the evils of the Nazi regime. Remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Buchenwald is remembered as one of the largest and first concentration camps established, and prisoners came from all over Europe. On the main gate was a motto, Jedem was sein, translating to each his own, and the SS viewed this motto as giving the master race the right and tools to annihilate and destroy other races. Inside, the conditions were very harsh, and one of the most prominent causes of death was starvation, with many prisoners being malnourished. Because of this, they also suffered from disease, and many were worked to death being provided with insufficient food and water. Many inmates also died as a result of human experimentation and executions, with hangings and shootings being carried out regularly. In particular, in 1941, it's estimated that at least 1,000 men were randomly selected for immediate execution by gunshot. The SS left accounts of the number of prisoners and people arriving and departing the camp. According to SS documents, it's documented that 33,462 died inside of Buchenwald, but this isn't completely accurate. The more accurate number of total deaths at Buchenwald has been estimated to have been around 56,000. What the liberators of Bergen-Belsen found when they arrived at the camp stayed with them until the day they died. The liberators were greeted with sights of sheer disease, starvation and ill treatment. Dead bodies lay everywhere inside of Belsen, but mixed amongst the prisoners were a number of high-profile SS guards, including infamous camp commandant Josef Kramer, the Beast of Belsen. Following its liberation and clean-up, guards such as Kramer and Irma Grazer were tried and executed for their roles at Belsen. It was at Belsen where Anne Frank and her sister were killed from the conditions and disease outbreaks inside. As the Second World War came to a conclusion, the SS began moving many prisoners from camps closer to the front lines, back towards Germany, and because of this, Belsen got hugely overcrowded. Before, the conditions were horrific, with evil guards inflicting reigns of terror, but the sheer number of inmates who arrived crippled the camp's infrastructure. The overcrowding led to typhus epidemics killing hundreds each day, and the guards gave hardly any food out, if any. This led to the deaths of over 35,000 people in the first months of 1945 alone. When the British arrived, they found 60,000 prisoners starving to death or ill, and 13,000 corpses lying around unburied. The SS destroyed the files of Belsen, documenting the prisoners, but it's estimated that at least 50,000 died at Belsen, and because of the overcrowding, it became impossible to calculate the exact number. Dachau was opened in March 1933 and first held political prisoners and enemies of the Nazis. Following its opening, it was enlarged and included forced labour elements into the camp, and it resulted in the imprisonment of over 188,000 prisoners. At Dachau, there was a reign of terror instilled by SS guards, who regularly executed prisoners in front of huge groups to make them incredibly fearful. There were standing cells inside the camp, meaning that prisoners were forced to stand in them for a long period of time, in one position, sometimes days on end. A huge network of subcamps was established and administered by Dachau, and after the war, a number of SS guards were sentenced to death for their crimes committed at the camp. When Dachau was liberated, the Allies came across a huge number of corpses, and the US soldiers immediately inflicted some revenge, shooting a number of SS guards themselves in bloody reprisals. At the time of liberation, because of the conditions, 200 people a day were dying, and the overall death count is alleged to be over 41,000, but the number is certainly more. Majdanek was a concentration extermination camp built on the outskirts of the Polish city of Lublin that had 7 gas chambers. The camp was used to murder people on a huge scale, and it was captured mostly intact at the end of the conflict. It had around 150,000 inmates who worked for the SS industries, in particular serving the armaments works. During the final solution, it became a site of industrial killing, with the creation of a number of gas chambers. After this, a huge amount of European Jews were transported there, to be killed as soon as they arrived. The SS personnel murdered thousands when the Warsaw Ghetto was liquidated, and the camp was known for its horrific efficiency. The SS guards were known also for their cruelty, and estimates on the amount murdered inside of the walls do vary. The Soviets after the war, it's believed, overestimated the number murdered there at over 400,000, but other estimates have said that up to 235,000 were killed, but it's believed to have been mostly around 80,000 murdered inside of the camp. Mauthausen was situated inside of Austria, near to Linz, where Hitler lived during his childhood. It opened in 1938 and became a colossal complex that saw hundreds of thousands pass through its gates. It was served also by a number of subcamps, and the prisoners were forced to conduct slave labour under terrible conditions. Many of them were forced to work inside of the quarries and ammunition factories there. New prisoners arrived daily from other concentration camps. The quarry was found at the bottom of some stairs, nicknamed the Stairs of Death, where prisoners were forced to carry incredibly heavy blocks of stones up 186 steps. The guards worked prisoners to death and threatened them at gunpoint. They even played sadistic tricks, in which they would force a prisoner to push the one in front off a cliff, and if not, they would be shot dead. They even threw prisoners onto the 380-volt barbed wire fence, killing them instantly. The SS also used icy showers on prisoners, killing around 3,000 with prisoners forced to take a freezing cold shower and then left outside in the cold. The Germans destroyed most of the camp's files and evidence, so the exact death toll is impossible to work out. The estimates do vary, but they are all huge. It's estimated that between 122,000 and 320,000 were killed inside of Mauthausen, with the number often quoted as over 200,000. Many of the camps listed so far have been concentration camps, where prisoners worked inside of. However, Sobibor was an extermination camp. They existed for the only reason as to murder Jews. Prisoners were not kept here to work, just to face their deaths. Those who were not killed as soon as they arrived were forced to assist in the murderous intent at Sobibor. The only prisoners who lived here were around 600 who were forced to help with the mass murder. Trains entered the camp and unloaded prisoners, and then they were forced to hand over their valuables and told to undress. The women had their hair cut off. They were then led along a 100-metre walk, nicknamed the Road to Heaven, to the gas chambers. The terror that faced those who were killed at Sobibor must have been horrifying. It was announced that prisoners would take a bath before entering the camp to work, but during this they entered the gas chambers and then they were gassed. The bodies were then interred in mass graves or were burned in the open air. The death toll at Sobibor was colossal, and it's estimated that between 170,000 and 250,000 Jews were murdered there. The most used figure is 250,000, based on the lack of evidence that survives, as it was destroyed by the SS. Chelmno was another extermination camp used by the Nazis. It was set up within Poland and was also used solely for mass murder and genocide. It was operated during the deadliest stage of the Holocaust, and many Jews who died here were transported from the ghettos in Poland. Many prisoners were loaded onto the lorries to be taken to Chelmno, and then once there, they were loaded onto vans where they were murdered with exhaust fumes and then buried in pits inside of the forest. Witnesses heard screaming as the fumes poured into the enclosed space, and this method killed thousands. The Sonderkommando, made up of Jewish prisoners, were then forced to take the bodies from the vans to be buried in large pits and cremated before their ashes being buried. They were also forced to clean the blood and excrement from the vans. Historians estimate that the SS murdered between 152,000 and 180,000 people at Chelmno during the time in which it operated. However, authorities inside of Poland place the estimate closer to around 340 people gassed there. Belzec was another extermination camp established, which was intended to just murder as many people as possible and as quickly as possible. Construction began in November 1941, and it was the first killing centre to implement Operation Reinhard. The stationary gas chambers had been created, and these were found in the centre of a former labour camp. The site was chosen due to its rail network and connections, and as soon as the infrastructure was set up, gassings began. Belzec had a small staff that horrifically instilled the executions of hundreds of thousands. Typically, freight trains made up of 40 and 60 cars arrived at the railway station, with around 100 crammed into each car. 20 cars were brought in at a time, and the Jews were then ordered to disembark before being taken into a reception area. They were then told to hand over all their valuables, and men and women were separated along with children. They were then forced to undress and were then told to run through the tube, which led directly to the gas chambers, which were labelled as showers and washrooms. Once the door was sealed, carbon monoxide was pumped into the gas chambers, killing those inside. The Sonderkommando then removed the bodies quickly and cremated them, before the next detachment were forced into the chambers. Belzec became the third deadliest camp of the Holocaust, with an estimated 434,000 to 600,000 being killed in this barbaric way at the camp. Treblinka was yet another extermination camp, established in a forest northeast of Warsaw, close to the village of Treblinka. It was used for only murdering as many Jews as possible, and more Jews were murdered here than at any Nazi extermination camp except for Auschwitz. It was managed by the SS, and there were two camps. Treblinka 1 was a forced labour camp, where prisoners worked in the forest cutting wood for the cremation pits. Around 20,000 died inside Treblinka 1 via shootings or were killed by disease, starvation and poor treatment. Treblinka 2 was the extermination camp, where the majority of people were murdered. Trains would transport people from Warsaw and other areas to Treblinka station, and all new arrivals were immediately sent to the undressing room. After undressing, the Jews were beaten with whips to force them into the gas chambers. Men were always gassed first, with women and children waiting outside for their turn. The women and children would hear the horrific screams of the men inside, which caused panic and distress. The brutality of the guards often saw women and children beaten sometimes to death, with one particular guard, nicknamed Ivan the Terrible, murdering many in horrific ways. It was estimated that 3,000 prisoners could be killed within 3 hours, with around 15,000 being killed a day. The victims were all murdered inside the gas chambers. The victims were murdered by carbon monoxide poisoning from engine exhaust fumes, and the bodies were then retrieved and burned in mass cremation pits. Treblinka was truly devastating, and it's estimated that between 700,000 and 900,000 were killed here. The largest death camp established by the Nazis was Auschwitz. It was divided into 3 main camps: Auschwitz I, the slave labour element, Auschwitz II Birkenau, the main extermination complex, and Auschwitz III Monowitz, the IG Farben factory. It was served also by a network of other subcamps and became a major site of the final solution. Auschwitz became infamous for its brutality and mass slaughter, with those who were not sent to the gas chambers being killed via starvation, disease, exhaustion, execution, medical experimentation, or being beaten to death. The SS guards ruled over with an iron fist, with anyone who refused to work or attempting to escape being brutally dealt with. The huge scale of the atrocities of Auschwitz are still being discovered today, and after the war no more than 15% of the staff of Auschwitz were ever brought to trial. Himmler ordered the camp to be established in preparation for the mass killings, and a number of crematoria and gas chambers were established in which hundreds of thousands were killed. Many prisoners did not even make it inside the camp, as once they arrived, they were selected to go to the gas chambers. Those who weren't deemed fit enough were killed almost instantly. Victims would be led towards the crematoria, then told to undress before being forced into the gas chambers. They used Zyklon B, a pesticide dropped into the chamber, to kill hundreds at a time. The conditions inside Auschwitz were also terrible, with death being seen on a daily basis, around every corner. Ultimately, at least 1.3 million people were transported to Auschwitz during its time in operation, and it's estimated that at least 1.1 million were killed inside the fences and inside the gas chambers. It became the deadliest site used by the Nazis for mass slaughter. I hope you found this video interesting. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.